This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Rauda back again with episode 58 of A Geek Leader, and today on the show I've got Jay Harris. Jay is a software consultant, the owner of Arana software, and he's been building websites since 1995. He's a Microsoft MVP. I met Jay at a conference a while back, many years ago, and I saw him recently at another conference and heard him speak, and I thought he'd be a good asset for the show. So I asked him to be on, and he accepted, which is awesome. In this conversation, we talked about his origin story. We talked about being your own expert, which was really eye-opening for me as something to think about as a tech leader. So with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed this conversation that I had with Jay Harris. All right, and we're live. I'm here with Jay Harris. And Jay, if you could just tell our audience a little bit about kind of how you got started in technology and how it led to where you are now and what you're doing now.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on the show. Let's see, my origin story. I was a little bit of a late bloomer as far as technology was concerned. It seems that all of my other friends already had computers and video game systems long before I did. And I don't mean that as a pity party thing. Obviously, I've done just fine with myself since then. But it really started for me back in the early 90s when my mother finally got us signed up for AOL. And I thought the internet was awesome. And I had been doing a little bit of desktop programming work because I liked playing video games. And I was convinced that I was going to grow up making more video games for myself. And then I found the internet, and the blink tag ruined everything for me. So I have been coding on the web for, over 20 years now. As far as what got me through, I am one of the many software developers. You've had many, even on your show, that don't have a computer science degree. That's not me. I think that's completely okay. And because of that, there's been plenty of times where I've had to sort of bust down the door to get a few things in. A great example from the very beginnings of my career is I went to university, a little tiny college in way upstate New York called Clarkson University. But back then, there wasn't much for web development, especially at Clarkson. And in my hometown, Rochester, New York, as another great university, the Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT. Mm-hmm. And they had quite a web development program, but I really wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. I was still going to school to be a glorified English major. But I wanted to get into a web development job, and our career services at Clarkson University had nothing for me at all. There wasn't one company that they were talking to that had anything to do with web development. And so it was difficult for me to find web development companies for internships, for that first job after college. And when I was trying to find that first internship, I spent a semester on co-op. I actually, let's say I found my way into RIT's protected career services webpage to find their list of web development companies that they had for their students.
Nice. Well said.
Ended up getting an interview with a company in Rochester called, at the time they were called Navistream. Now they're a part of Tenet Partners. And I got an interview with two of their executives, Hampton Bridwell and Larry Roth. And I remember clear as day, like it was yesterday, Larry looking across the table at me during this interview. You did what to RIT? He's, of course, an RIT alumni. I should add that in. You did what to RIT? Don't you feel bad about taking one of their jobs? No, I don't, because you're more than still welcome to sit across the table from them and interview them. And if they're better than me, then you should hire them instead of me. So
Wow.
it worked.
It worked.
It worked. I ended up getting that job. It worked. But sometimes you have to fight for what you want along the way, and that's okay.
Yeah, I actually started out not as a computer science major either. So I find a lot of folks that really have passion for software development and technology in general didn't start out as a computer science major.
Right.
I'm not sure why that is, but that seems to be very common.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you got that job, and how'd you get to starting a company? How was that shift in that process?
So over time throughout my career, I had been working at various big corporations or small consulting shops that had clients that were big corporations. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed doing what I was doing, but ended up always having some side work, little other projects that were my own thing on the side, like a lot of people do, little stuff, not a whole lot of money, sort of almost hobbyist, if you will. Mm-hmm. And over time, that grew, and that grew and grew and grew, and more people were coming to me, or I was finding more and more side work clients, and it really got to the point where I would be putting in my normal, let's pretend that it was 40 hours a week working for my normal W-2 job, and then I'd go home and it'd be another 40 hours a week working for myself, and that was just too much. That was crazy. That was leading to a lot of burnout, so I just decided, let's get rid of the W-2 job. Because I like the side work a lot more, because otherwise I wouldn't be having this side work. I just made the side work my main thing. Went and filed all the paperwork with the state to create Arana software, and now 7 years later of it being a full-time endeavor, here we are.
Wow. So I'm a big fan of side hustles and side work, and actually gave a talk on that at CodeStock this past year. I definitely think it's beneficial. What did you learn by doing things on your own, kind of on the side, that may have been beneficial to your day job and may have actually led to you starting your own company?
Oh, wow. Well, probably one of the best things from my perspective about having side work is I can be much more choosy about my projects. And of course, having my own company, the same still holds true. Doing things on my own, I get to choose the projects that I work on. I get to choose the clients that we engage with. When I'm working for a consulting company, or even more so when I'm working just for some big corporation that's not consulting, it's not my decision. It's not my call about which projects that I get to work on. And particularly when it's working for a big corporation, I find that I tend to get a little bit bored. After so many years of working in the exact same problem space, it feels very routine. It feels like I've done this all before. And it's not as engaging. It's not as intriguing. And I think that has probably been the number one driver between many of my between my employer shifts throughout that portion of my career when I wasn't working for myself. Now, of course, we Arana have clients that are in many different industries. So as soon as a project ends, we'll work on something for a different client that's in a different industry that's a very new problem space. I enjoy that. It keeps me entertained. It keeps me engaged.
No, I hear that a lot with people that I've been mostly at small companies or mid-sized companies. I haven't been anywhere more than 1,000 employees. More than just a little bit over 1,000 employees. But I found that a lot of people that are in those large companies working on one product or one module of a product sometimes seem to get burned out or a little bit bored with their daily activities and tasks. Seems to be a pretty common thing.
Absolutely. I've seen it with the smaller organizations too. There are many just small consulting shops that have that one cornerstone client, that one cornerstone client where if they go away, the whole consultancy is just going to shut down. And it's at that point, that product or that client, it's almost just like another arm of the same single problem space. And for me, that still leads eventually to the same burnout and the same disinterest and the same boredom.
Yeah, I definitely get that. So one of the things that when you were making this shift into, hey, I'm got so much going on at home with the side projects and with work, how is it that you made the decision that this is just too much? I've got to do something. Like, what was that? What was the breaking point?
Well, there was, I think for me, there was an employer that I worked for many, many years ago, where there were several consecutive months where I was putting in well more than 300 billable hours in a month. And most months, the average month has up to 168 billable hours. It's on average, there's 21 business days across 8 hours a day, the 9 to 5. So having over 300 hours a month consistently for several months in a row, that's more than double time, and that was just way too much. There was a lot of exhaustion, burnout, not from boredom, but burnout from just being flat out spent. Mm-hmm. I can't go anymore. My body will just say no. So in those later years, immediately before Arana became my full-time endeavor, it was that same thing. It was working for my employer for essentially one full-time job, and then working for Arana as my second full-time job, and that's still 300 hours, billable hours in a month. Mm-hmm. And that same exhaustion, that same physical exhaustion started to sink in, and I knew that I wanted to continue Arana, but I knew that I couldn't do both. So that just ended up being an easy choice. One of these has to go.
Yeah. I think it's always easier when it's when you have something that is successful that you are putting in those hours to. What gets challenging, I think, with some people when they want to go to the entrepreneurship and they don't have enough side work to give them that quite that 40 hours, going forward, it's kind of difficult to step back and move away.
Sure. Absolutely. And there's some things that go into that to help making that successful. Certainly, making sure that you have a nest egg, make sure that you have an emergency fund, because even still, for me, when I was just starting out, that 40 hours was really more just an immediate term. Those weren't long-term contracts that were going to span many years. Mm-hmm. So shifting that to full-time completely shifted my approach to Arana, because now it mattered even more. It always mattered. I wanted to deliver quality software to my clients, but I had this other full-time job. So if another client didn't come along for 6 months, it's not really a big deal. I'm going to enjoy my summer. I don't know. But now it mattered. When there's just Arana, if I go 6 months without a client, I've got a problem.
Yeah, you're hungry.
So right. There was still a massive shift in how I approach all of the ancillary work, and I really put that into anything that's not absolute core business. Legal, accounting, going through all of the insurance stuff. I could spend less time on that now because I had to focus all of my time either on marketing to get new clients or on doing to complete the projects for those clients.
So what was that like? Having to shift from writing code to now you have to do sales and marketing as well, because that's one thing that I know, being from the technical side, that's kind of scary. It's kind of scary to have to try to sell and do marketing on top of writing code.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there's a couple of things to that. I did have some advantages, I believe, which, of course, included me being a glorified English major. So back in college, there was a tremendous amount of writing. There was a tremendous amount of classes that were on public speaking. So there was... I certainly wouldn't lie and say there was no fear about getting in front of someone to market myself. but maybe less fear of that, which of course I think is marketing ourselves is entirely a different issue. Maybe we can table that one for a few minutes. But certainly there was some struggle with that. Was struggling to figure out how to do that. It's stuff that I still struggle with now. I'm no great marketing genius by any means. So it still takes effort to make sure that I stay in contact with all of the social medias. It still takes effort to try and remember to write new blog posts or to keep the website up to date. So there's certainly a challenge there, especially when we get behind. If we get behind on a project, it almost seems like marketing is the first thing that wanes, that takes a back seat, so that we can have that hours that we're allocated to marketing, have those hours back to work on getting caught up to finishing the project. And of course, still that's stealing from one pot to help the other. Eventually, you got to pay off that marketing debt, because marketing debt is a revenue issue. It's not you have to pay that back just like you do technical debt on a code project.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's one thing I think I do want to talk about marketing yourself, because I think that's really important for all developers and leaders to do, as well as market their teams. That's something I know when you look back at especially on the infrastructure side of the house when it comes to IT, it's really difficult because they're not building new software that is generating revenue. There's no ROI for when it comes to investment as far as sales that you can see. It's more of a behind the scenes thing, and I think in order to benefit those groups and those individuals, marketing is really important. So what kind of advice would you give to someone that needed to market themselves, that's never done that may be a team lead or a senior developer or something like that?
That one, to me, that one's a struggle. That's a deep subject and a lot of a can of worms. I really like that we as an industry seem to be talking so much more about mental health, about imposter syndrome. I know with your show, there's been quite a few recent guests that have talked about those same topics.
That's right, there has.
Our Dolan was talking about that. Jim Holmes was talking about that. And to me, that's all that stuff is also tied into our celebration of ourselves. Almost societally, it feels like we're not allowed to have mental health issues at all.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk about them. We're allowed to be sick. We're allowed to, if we're throwing up all over the floor, we're allowed to stay home. But if our brain is metaphorically throwing up all over the floor, we're not allowed to take a day to go do that. Some of us are. Mm-hmm. Some of us in our industry were able to. A friend of mine in Michigan, Ken, he talks to me about he's certainly within his space to go take a mental health day, to call up his lead and say, hey, I know this isn't with warning, but I need to take a mental health day. And of course, if you're taking a normal sick day because you're literally vomiting all over the floor, you're not going to have any warning to take a normal sick day. We should have the same thing for our mental health. And now Ken, he's a roller coaster junkie. So sometimes that mental health day means that he's just going down to Cedar Point and riding every single roller coaster that they have twice, which of course makes sense if you need a mental health day. It's, we seem to have this stigma against taking a sick day to go fishing. Why? We need that mental break. Here, living here in Vegas, what was it? CSI, the original CSI TV show that took place here in Vegas. The leader, Gil Grissom.
I remember Gil. Yeah.
There were plenty of shows that after he had a rough day, the show ended with him riding the Big Apple coaster that goes around the New York casino here in Vegas. That was his mental health break. We need those. as humans, which relates into that imposter syndrome. And I think the imposter syndrome, part of the contributor to the imposter syndrome is to sort of unravel my tangent, is almost this societal pressure to not celebrate ourselves. If I asked you, what are you great at? No, if I asked you, what are you an expert in? You're probably going to have some pause in talking about those things. Sure. There's endless amount of developers that I know that I would consider experts in C# or experts in JavaScript or experts in Ruby. But at the same time, many of those experts in Ruby, they're not going to call themselves experts in Ruby because their name isn't DHH. Their name isn't the person that created whatever framework that they spend their day on, and they consider that person the only person that's allowed to call themselves an expert, which, I don't know, doesn't really make sense. Anybody that's playing, Major League Baseball, anybody that's playing professional baseball, even if it's in the minor leagues, I would consider them an expert in baseball. They're obviously good enough at playing baseball to get paid to play baseball. And I don't quite understand why we don't have that same gauge, if you will, in the rest of our professional lives. So why aren't we all just experts in building software? We have to be pretty good, otherwise no one would pay us to do it.
I think you're onto something there, and I think you're exactly right. When you ask, what are you an expert in? I was very hesitant to say the things that I do, and I don't know if that's because I am self-conscious about that, or if I'm not as proud. But yeah, that imposter syndrome definitely steps in and creeps up, and it makes me feel like, yeah, you're right. I don't celebrate, the things that I'm good at often.
We could all name others, colleagues in our industries that may or may not do exactly what we do that we would still consider experts. Probably most importantly, the ones that do exactly what it is that we do, we call them experts, even though we don't call ourselves experts at the same, or at equivalent skill set, at similar skill sets, similar talent levels. If we're calling our colleague in the next desk over an expert when we can do what they do and they can do what we do, then why aren't we also calling ourselves an expert in this thing?
That's you're absolutely right. So how can I translate that concept of being an expert into showing other people that I'm an expert?
To me, I just think that's being a little bit more deliberate and a little bit more frank about the things that we are good at, of just owning, hey, I'm an expert in web development. It's what I do every day. It's what I've been doing every day for 20 years. It's what people pay me to do every day for 20 years. I know a lot of people that couldn't even fathom how to begin to do what it is that I do every day for the last 20 years. I am an expert. And that's okay to say. Yeah. I'm not belittling you and your ability to make web pages. When I'm talking about me being an expert, you can certainly be an expert too. Me saying that I'm an expert doesn't diminish you in any way. And I think that's we just have to get past that about ourselves. We don't celebrate the things that we are good at, especially when it's the things that we are better than our peers. Mm-hmm. And I don't just mean the peers that are in the industry. I mean the peers that are all around us, the peer that, the person that lives in the house across the street, or other members of our family, or our circle of friends, probably many of which are not even close to in our industry. I have a good friend here in Las Vegas. He's an expert as a real estate agent. Compared to him, I'm certainly not even close in how to sell houses. And compared to him, I am an expert at building web pages. And that's all right.
That's
only
really
what we.
That's really well put, and it's really interesting because I never really thought about, as you're saying this, I'm thinking of one of my friends right now who works in sales, and I would consider him to be an expert in sales. And when I think about him, and I try to say now, how would he consider me? And I've actually heard him say this before. John's a computer expert. And I would never call myself that, but maybe he's right. Maybe I should think like that. And that does go a long way when it comes to mental health and self-worth and those things that we were talking about earlier. And I do want to talk more about that, but I think you're absolutely right. And it's something I haven't heard anybody really say is to call ourselves experts.
Right. It's certainly going to lead to an imposter syndrome when I'm only comparing myself to the expert level qualities of the people that are around me. Mm-hmm. And while ignoring the expert level qualities that I have. And they're rarely going to mesh up between me and them. We're always going to have our unique talents. Some of them are innate. Some of those talents we just seem to have been born with, and we can do this thing with our eyes closed. It's always been that way. We can't help but be that way. Some of them are, of course, with lots of research and dedication and hard work and training, and they've sort of evolved into us being an expert. But regardless, you're still an expert in both of those things. And so when it comes to the marketing, when it comes to the self-marketing, it's okay when someone says, John, what are you an expert in? For you to answer them with this and this and this and this and this. You're not claiming to be the best.
Yeah, that's right.
You're not claiming to be better than everybody else on the planet or the history of the planet in this thing. You're just an expert.
Yeah, I mean, you make perfect sense, and I've never heard anybody really talk about it that way. But even in my discussions about the imposter syndrome, it's saying you're an expert. I mean, that word expert, specifically, it just makes you feel better.
Right. It really helps with that imposter syndrome because, yes, I might be an imposter when it comes to these things over here, because look at the sea of other experts. I might not be expert level in whatever that one thing is, but it's okay because all of this other sea of things, I am an expert, and I have a whole lot of redeeming qualities. I have a whole lot of redeeming talents. Even if I am not some super ninja, rock star, awesome, whatever buzzword you want to use on this thing, that's okay. If it's important to me, I probably will be someday on that thing. And I've already got these other things to prove that I know how to be an expert in something.
Yeah, that's actually really good. I'm surprised. I'm kind of just blown away that I haven't really thought about that before, and the impact of just thinking about the word expert and how that makes it makes my confidence just rise a little bit when I think about being an expert in the technology space.
Right. Think of how many people that you know that already consider you a expert in the technology space, and they can't all be wrong.
You're right. Some of them are, but yeah, no, that's really good. That's definitely a great way of thinking about ourselves to help make ourselves feel better. Now, what you said about mental health days earlier, I definitely agree. We do need to have those. There's many times where it's just like the overwhelming amount of things that I focus on at work, I have to just drain my brain of. And kind of reboot and reset that and just step away. And that's one of the things I've started doing more frequently instead of taking work home. It's just it's going to stay at work today. I'm going to get home. I'm going to turn my phone off for a period of time and just not worry about it and think about things that way. What are some tips that you have to help us with those when we need those mental health days?
Well, as a leader, certainly enable your the other members of your team. Keep that communication lines open and make sure that they know that it's okay to take a mental health day. Here at Arana, we don't have a vacation policy. We don't have a sick day policy. If you need to stay home, either because you, again, are literally vomiting all over the floor or you're mentally vomiting all over the floor, I don't care which. If you need to take a day, go take a day. we're all professionals. We're all adults. If I really don't even care if you take a day to go fishing. If you need a day to go fishing, if you need that mental break, go do it. Because I know that the alternative is you coming into work, you working for some client project, completely burnout, completely out of your mind, completely where you want to be doing anything else but this right here. And I know that in any of those scenarios, your output is going to be horrible. It's not going to be your best. And I would rather you take a day, take a break, and come back at your best, doing good stuff that you're proud of, rather than just fumbling your way through the keyboard for a few hours.
No, I think you're absolutely right. When you think about it, 8 hours is not equal to 8 hours. 8 hours of being burned out and trying to work doesn't produce 8 hours of I'm energized, I'm refreshed work.
Right. We've all had those days where we should have taken a mental health day, where we get in the morning and then all of a sudden it's 5 o'clock and it's that you're thankful that 5 o'clock is finally here, that you can go home, that you didn't get anything done. And it wasn't because there was a sea of distractions. And it's not like one of those good days of, wow, it's 5 o'clock already. Look at all the things that I get. I jammed away today. No, it's, oh, this day was miserable. I'm so thankful that this day is finally over. Yeah. We need that time. We don't talk about, as a society, we don't talk about mental health enough. We don't put enough focus on mental health enough. If you chopped your arm off, we would go to the hospital in a second. But any sort of mental issues, the things where we're not bleeding all over the place, we want to try and suppress them. Whether it's particularly when it comes to depression. Oh, just focus on something happy, because that's going to be the instant resolve. So
yeah, I know a lot of times when people say focus on something happy, I just think, I think of not having that thing that's happy. It doesn't really work.
Because we didn't already think about that. You know what? I didn't think about that. Thank you for reminding me that I just need to think about something happy, because that never crossed my mind.
Yeah, exactly. Why do you think it is that we don't talk about mental health and the challenges that we face as often? And to piggyback on that, why do you think? Because I feel like, and maybe I'm wrong, that this is something that's more prevalent in software development and technology fields than in other areas. Why do you think that might be?
Oh, wow. That's another can of worms. Number one, I think diversity or lack of diversity is probably one of the primary drivers behind this lack of discussion around mental health in our industry. We all have the same ethnicity. We all have the same gender. We all have the same upbringing. How many times have you heard the story about, and not faulting this at all, but it seems almost everywhere that someone started out their origin story as a Commodore 64 or an Apple IIe of taking the code that they got in a magazine and type it in, and that's how they learned how to do coding.
Almost everybody. Yep.
That origin story is just the same for everybody. And then combine that with the imposter syndrome, and we almost have this, I need to suck it up. I need to muster up my inner John Wayne and pretend that I don't have any emotion, any feelings, anything at all that ever happens bad to me anywhere, except unless I'm bleeding, then it's okay. But in any other scenario, I'm perfect. Life is good. We're, the Beaver Cleaver family. So we just have, I think it's a lot of societal, especially when there's such a monoculture, such a lack of any diversity whatsoever in our industry. It sort of almost further forces us to recreate 1984, to all be the exact same cog, the exact same machine doing our thing for 8 hours.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely see that. And, the diversity thing is really, it's challenging for me, and it's difficult, because it's hard for me to get the perspective of others, and I mean, my wife is in tech, so I think about that too. But when I'm teaching at Winthrop University and I'm looking at the students that and Winthrop is primarily, it's probably 70% female when it comes to gender diversity anyway, and I'll have a computer science class with 22 students and 2 will be female, and it bothers me. I'm like, well, why is that the case? What is causing that, and how can that be fixed? And I don't know the answers to that.
Right. It's I don't know. From me, it's we've got to reach out. We've got to find more mentees, be more open mentors, of really pursue bringing in other speakers and role models into the industry that represent not the monoculture that's already there. And of course, we've all heard, well, I opened up, I don't know, for a conference, I opened up my call to speakers the same for everybody. Anybody could have went and submitted for my conference. Why should I have to go and pursue this particular diversity group to make sure that it's not just a bunch of, I don't know, old white dudes speaking on a panel.
Yeah.
But if we're trying to make the greatest piece of software, if we're trying to come up with a new idea as a company along those same lines, you wouldn't just want a whole conference room full of people that are just going to say, yes, that's a great idea to whatever you come up with and not have any different ideas whatsoever.
Right.
That wouldn't fly for you as a business person. So that diversification helps broaden the pool of other experiences, of other cultures, of other ideas, and ultimately a whole new world of wonderful opportunities of the great things that we can do, that we can build, that we can accomplish.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, I think diversity is very important, especially when you're, coming up with ideas or thinking about anything that requires creative work or solving problems or benefiting people in general, like conferences and such. It's better to have as many different viewpoints and perspectives on any one topic to get the real, true viewpoint, the true idea, the true solution to the problem. I think all that's important. It's just, how do you get there when you don't have, it is hard to go and find those speakers and those people to bring them in. It's definitely a challenge that we need to work on as a tech community. We all need to be working on it.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not absolutely worth doing.
Exactly. Most of the things that are hard are the things we need to be doing the most anyway.
If everything was easy, I'd be bored out of my mind.
Well, talking about this diversity, you mentioned conferences and speaking. I know you've given some pretty good talks. I've actually heard you speak a couple of times. And I wanted to ask you kind of what do you think the benefits are for a team lead or a developer getting up and speaking at a conference?
Benefits for a team leader or for a developer getting up and speaking at a conference. There's an endless supply. One, of course, is getting those new ideas from people that are not in your problem space. Recognizing, of course, from our conversation a half hour ago, that problem space could just be this, I don't know, automotive or medical or whatever piece of the industry pie that you are spending your entire day at. So getting new ideas. In the .NET space, we have poached so many ideas from other non.NET space things inside of software development. Things like NHibernate didn't originate in .NET, and NUnit didn't originate in .NET. We've got so many things that we almost take for granted every day that are sort of cross-pollinated from other areas. So there's certainly that benefit. Two, speaking helps make you a better communicator, and particularly better at help portraying your thoughts and your ideas and your needs as a software developer, which we still have to do every day. Every time we just want to go to one of our leads or one of our superiors and say, hey, I think that I could be more productive if I had a copy of CodeRush, or I think we could be more productive if we spent a week and paid off some of the technical debt on this application. We still have to justify those things. And sometimes it's a little fuzzy on how much benefit there will be from that thing. We know it. We know that we're going to be more productive because we have this library tool, or we're going to be more productive if we paid off some of this technical debt. But we're not very good at communicating that benefit to others, particularly to non-technical folks, especially since for the most part, the other technical folks on our team, they already know anyway. They already know the benefit of paying off the technical debt, so we don't need to communicate to them. So better opportunity for cross-pollination and ideas, things like me learning Ruby. Even the fundamentals of Ruby makes me a much better C# developer. The communication aspects makes it easier for me to justify new tools and new effort. I still have to, even as a business owner, I have to justify to clients paying off technical debt. And yeah, that diversity space too. Not just learning new ideas of how Ruby makes us a better C# developer, but seeing new experiences, new approaches to life. I mean, things like maybe not so much as in a technical conference, because there's such a gender imbalance in our industry. But if you go to a concert, the line for the men's room is always short, and the line for the women's room is always ridiculously long. And to me, that's a design flaw of the bathrooms at the stadium, at the facility. Maybe. No, I'm not. I don't even think maybe. I'm certain that with more diversity in the design of our applications, in the implementation of our applications, we can make better applications that, don't lead to the proverbial long line at the women's room.
Right. I think you're absolutely right. I had a couple more questions, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about the importance for folks to give back to the community and to volunteer and for service in general. That's something that I'm passionate about, and I just wanted to hear what your thoughts are on giving back to the community, and what are some ways that people can do that.
Oh, certainly. For me, that started out actually. That's a lot of how I got involved in speaking as a whole, giving back. I certainly gained a lot in my career from the experience and mentorship of others, of going to user groups and learning so much from whomever was standing in the front of the room. So me getting into speaking was my opportunity to give back to that same community that already given me so much. Now that is expanded into GiveCamp. I am president of the national organization for GiveCamp, and also still run some local events for GiveCamp. What a GiveCamp is, it's a weekend long coding for charity event where in whatever given city we're holding a GiveCamp event. The technologists in that local area can get together for a weekend and knock out some custom software or a new website, some sort of custom software for an area technology or area nonprofit in need. Not the big ones like the Red Cross or the United Way, but the little ones, because something like the local animal shelter, they don't get a lot of money. They don't get a lot of donations. So what money that they do get is spent on dog food and cat litter, and not on a new website to market the animal shelter, or they're still working their way through yet another Excel sheet to manage all of the animals that they have in the shelter, which of course makes their lives harder. But technology is expensive. Technologists are expensive. So through GiveCamp, we can get the local community, the local technology community together and involved, giving back to these nonprofits that already give so much to our community. There's one coming up in Ann Arbor in a couple weeks. The weekend of the 14th through the 16th of September is Ann Arbor GiveCamp. Still accepting additional nonprofits and additional volunteers for that one. But it's a great way to also allow our technology community to pair and to work with other members of the technology community that you wouldn't normally do. You and I, we've been to several conferences at the same time, and we've had plenty of conversation about technology, but we've never had the opportunity to sit down and work together.
That's right.
So something like a GiveCamp is a great opportunity for that.
It is. It's also a great way to kind of learn a new skill that you've wanted to build something on, but you haven't had the ability with your current job or something to build using those. You can use a GiveCamp as a way to actually produce something with technology you're learning. Yeah, so.
Right. And a lot of times that gets all the way back to bringing it full circle, the being an expert and the imposter syndrome stuff. There's so many times where the technology need for a nonprofit might be something as simple as a WordPress site, but a technologist, well, I don't know WordPress. Yeah, but you're an expert in technology. I'm confident that you can pick up WordPress in a couple of hours. Easy. If I always remember my grandmother, the clock on the front of her VCR was always blinking. So one of the things that was just on my task list when I went over to Grandma's house was to fix the clock on the VCR. Maybe after 10 years, she'll buy a new VCR, and it would take me all of a minute and a half to figure out, without the instructions, how to program the clock on the VCR. So that's what we do. We don't need to be the person that created WordPress in order to spin up a WordPress site for a nonprofit in need. We're already an expert in WordPress, even if we haven't touched WordPress at all.
No, that's right. That's really good stuff. What in closing, what kind of advice would you give to a tech lead or team lead that's interested in becoming more, growing themselves in leadership and learning more about some of these things that we talked about?
Some advice for leaders. Sort of as we've talked about, for a lot of forgiveness for yourself on that imposter syndrome, and with that, celebrating the areas that we are experts in, celebrating ourselves, and then not only doing that, but doing that for the other members of our team as well. I find that we're already a whole lot better at the latter than we are at the former. We're already a whole lot better at celebrating the expert level qualities of our team than we are of ourselves. Certainly, having an open communication plan and a lot of forgiveness for our team members and for ourselves when we're having a bad day. If someone needs to go take a break, go take a break. And then, of course, I sort of a little bit unrelated of recognizing that we don't need to be an expert in whatever field our team is working on, because this is being a leader is about it's about managing humans, not managing bits. to sort of steal a phrase from Michael Lopp. He has a great book, Managing Humans. Michael Lopp, you might know him from the domain Rands and Repose. Great book. So yeah, maybe go read that one.
Yeah, I'll definitely link that up in the show notes. I think Managing Humans is a great book. And that quote's great too. It is about managing people and not the bits, because, if I had to be as good of an expert as all the people that I manage, then our team wouldn't be very good.
Right. Think about professional sports. There are so many awesome, great coaches and great managers of various sporting teams that are nowhere as good as out on the field or out on the ice or out on the whatever as the players that they manage. I couldn't hit a ball 350 feet to save my life. But that doesn't mean that I don't know a lot about the strategy of the game of baseball. Mm-hmm. Likewise, with tech leaders, you can understand the strategy of the business, which is really about what leading the team is all about. You can be an expert in the strategy of the business without knowing end to end the compile process of a .NET application.
Yep, that's good. That's you're absolutely right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on. And how can people find out more about you or connect with you if they have any questions or anything else they want to follow up with?
The best place to reach out to me is on Twitter. I am at jharris, Jay Harris, on Twitter. And it's not launched yet, but recently I'm happy that I acquired jharris.com. I just bought it, so I'm still finishing up building the website for it. Surprisingly, there's a whole lot of Jay Harrises in the world. My Google nemesis is Jay Harris. That's the anchor on ESPN SportsCenter. But there are also so many other Jay Harrises. There's even another Jay Harris that's a speaker and software developer here in the U.S.
Oh, wow.
So jharris.com will be launching soon, but certainly Jay Harris on Twitter is probably the best way.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show and giving us some good advice about being experts.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.